This episode of the Party Loaded podcast is proudly sponsored by Audible.com. Check out their awesome catalogue of audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from. And be sure to grab a free audiobook on us and support the show by visiting audibletrial.com/endgame.
Let's party.
Hello and welcome to Party Loaded. It is Party Loaded episode 144 for the 13th of September 2018. Episode 144, which I'd also like to refer to as Party Loaded XSXILR, whatever the fuck these naming conventions are these days. Apple's done the best job of it lately, so let's take a leaf from their book. Or let's not. So, joining me tonight, my name's Luke Ritalik. We've also got Matt Diet.
Yeah, hello.
Yep. I was about to say Game Dad, but then I stuttered into Diet. So there you go. You get to blend in tonight.
Also Game Dad.
That's it. Christian Bolson Brown is also here.
Hello.
Hello. What's going on? We all sort of done web slinging temporarily, so we could have a pause and talk about said web slinging.
Yes.
Is that going to be a thing tonight?
Just a pause.
Absolutely.
So we say at the top of the show that if anyone's come here tonight looking for a reprieve from all of the Spider-Man talk that's been going out everywhere this week, you done goofed, you've come to the wrong place.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, yeah. But if you are here, in fact, to listen to a whole bunch of that stuff, then, boy, you're in for a treat. But before we kick off with that, we do have a bit of other stuff to talk about. So, gentlemen, I'd like to actually circle back around to where we left off last week and indulge for a moment, if you will. So we had a real fun discussion in last week's episode about our party game of the month, Cultist Simulator, and sort of left off at the end of that with us all sort of going to play it again and generate some additional thoughts. So I'm actually curious whether you guys did that.
I did. I didn't get a lot more opportunity to play it because literally the morning after we recorded the podcast, I had to unplug my computers and move house. And then ever since I've got everything plugged back in, I've just been playing Spider-Man. But I did play it. I did play Cultist Simulator a little bit more, and I took Matt's tip or advice, and I set up a Word document on my second monitor, and I started writing down the results of all the experimentation of what cards I was getting out of which combinations, and that instantly helped, and everything kind of fell into place a lot more for me, and I started to enjoy it a lot more, and I finally got that grip, finally got that hold on the game that I was looking for but had failed to grasp, just enough to sort of keep me afloat. And I found it a lot more intriguing, and I'll definitely make some more time for it in future. So yeah, for me, getting to grips with the basic sort of results of different card combinations, that has boosted it a lot in my books.
Yeah, because it was the same thing for me. Like, well, when I said, maybe it will actually be better if you're taking notes, it was one of those thinking aloud moments where I just went, wait a second, that's a really good idea. And I went and did the same thing. I went and did the same thing. I went and opened a notepad document and actually started writing stuff down. And then the notes I was spitting out, I'm like, you know what, this would actually be really, really cool if I made this more immersive. So I went and closed the Word document, and I went and opened an actual physical notepad and started writing down all this arcane
I thought for a second you were going to say you went away and opened your wrist and then started drawing arcane sigils.
No, nothing like that. Nothing that grim. But no, I actually started writing into a notebook. And so now I have a notebook that's got all these, if somebody were to actually come and go through my room and actually find this notebook, they'd be like, what the hell has this guy gotten into? Because that looks kind of messed up. But yeah, no, I put in like another hour or two, and my feelings about it are pretty much the same. Like, I really enjoy the game, but it now feels like this is the best way to play it, is to actually let some of it bleed over into reality that way. I really enjoy it. It's really cool.
And it made me think about our tutorial discussion. And for me, even if there's a note when you open the game that says like, if you're confused or this game is best played, take it while taking notes or something like that. Like even that I think would have helped me from the start. But so we had a full discussion on whether or not this game should have a tutorial, and I think even that would have helped.
I think what would absolutely help now is if you open up the game and it says, go have a listen to this awesome podcast that talks about our game for like 40 minutes straight.
Yeah.
And then come back and play it.
All right, let's get on that. Call it the devs.
Yeah, I took a slightly different approach, actually. I actually played another round, but then I went and actually looked for some video content on the game because I wanted to get a bit of a window into other people playing it and what they were kind of experiencing and how much more of the content and story paths maybe we hadn't seen. And I found some crazy high-level endgame stuff that, like, I'd stopped before it spoiled too much for me, but it got me thinking that there are very, very many layers of this onion that we are yet to peel that I'm kind of curious to do when I've got a bit more time and we're not in silly peak season. So, but yeah, there's a ton of stuff that looks perplexing about that game that we have not seen any of yet. So there you go. Yeah, so Cultist Simulator. That's a game. So... All right, speaking of games, before Spidey launched last week, Matt, if I am not mistaken, you and I actually had a brief window to jump in and play some of the new Destiny 2 Forsaken. So
yes.
How did you get on with that?
I've gotten a few missions in, and I've not made a huge dent yet because it wasn't very long after that Spidey came out, and I made the mistake of playing a little bit of Spidey, which turned into a lot of Spidey. But, oh man, I love the story direction so far. Like, just a couple of missions in, making it super personal was a really smart move. Playing Galactic Super Cop is fun, but playing loose cannon Galactic Super Cop is really cool. Like, bringing back the character's voice as well, which I feel like that's just... It's probably more them just trying to make callbacks to original Destiny, them giving the player's voice back. But at the same time, as a narrative move, it feels really awesome that all this time your character has chosen to remain silent and didn't choose to speak again until it became personal. Like, that feels silly, really cool.
Like, why would your character remain silent through the whole Destiny 2 campaign?
Because Ghost never shuts up.
Yeah, it's kind of true. It's inadvertently had a bit of a Silent Bob effect, but not in a comedy sense. Like, because you know how Jane Silent Bob, like in all of the Mallrats and Clerks and those sorts of movies, like Silent Bob's always silent. Like, he doesn't say anything until I think it's Dogma, where there's like this one moment where he actually says a line. I think he does it in one of the other later movies as well, and it's like. As silent as you stay, when you finally open your mouth, people pay the fuck attention.
Yeah,
they really want to hear what you have to say. Yeah. And the moment they chose to do that in the story sort of cutscenes for this campaign was the absolute most pivotal, appropriate moment for them to do it. It was very cool.
For sure.
So,
there was some news that I saw before, which I'm not sure if you guys caught, but so Nathan Fillion mentioned that he doesn't actually voice Cade 6 in the expansion.
I was surprised by that because it sounds very like him. Yeah.
It's Nolan North. Like,
you're kidding me.
He just has... What the hell? Like, his voice acting is ridiculous. But more interesting than that is the fact that Nathan Fillion reckons that Cade 6 isn't dead.
Okay, interesting.
So the fact that it was voiced by Nolan North, and clearly there was obviously some scheduling issues that prevented Nathan Fillion from getting in the recording studio and recording Forsaken, oh God, there's so much story opportunity coming from this. I have seen to my friends also saying apparently the ending is a bit iffy, but I haven't gotten there yet, so we'll see what happens. But I'm pretty excited.
You got to laugh at the slim degrees of separation here between Nolan North and Nathan Fillion, especially with the recent Uncharted fan movie stuff.
Yeah,
it's just like
it's so silly. I just imagine that those two just have to hang out sometimes and have coffee or something.
yeah, that would be great. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I've been loving Forsaken so far. Like, I'm nowhere near the end game yet. I'm still churning through the story content like you are, but I have had a chance to sample some of the big editions of the new content. A couple of things I'll say is that first and foremost, Destiny 2 and the bow. Have you played around with the bow much yet, Matt?
Yes. Holy
Do you think that I am out of line saying that this is the best bow in video games ever? Holy fuck, it's good.
It absolutely is the best bow in video games ever. And there's a lot of competition in terms of, like, there's so many games with bows getting injected into them now, but just Destiny 2 has so nailed it. It totally helps as well that the very first bow they give you has explosive arrowheads.
Yeah.
So like you go and fire it into a crowd and then it hits something and it kills that thing. But then there's this satisfying pause as while that body is about to hit the floor, all the other bodies around it go flying in many directions because the arrowhead just exploded. And there's a pause for that. So it's really kind of this satisfying, I know what's about to happen. And then you see it happen, and it's just I've got this SMG that I have on my Warlock that I was like, do I really want to swap that out for a bow? Do I really want another accuracy weapon? And then I started playing with it.
Yes, you want the bow.
Yeah, it's like, this isn't an accuracy weapon at all.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's so much fun.
I love the way it sounds. I love the way it looks. The way it feels is incredible. Like, someone asked me today whether I thought it was better than the Aloy's bow in Horizon Zero Dawn. And I had to have a think about that for a second because obviously there's a lot of versatility with that weapon with all the upgrades and stuff that you get in Horizon. But at the end of the day, I think that the core feel and usability of this thing, I think the Destiny bow is the best one. It's incredible how good a job they've done with it. So I'm very much I'm very scared of the moment where I have out-leveled the bow with my other weapons and I feel the need to swap just to sort of keep that level up. But
if there's one thing that Bungie does really well in Destiny, it's nailing weapon feel. Like, their guns are so much fun to use that you can go in there and completely forgive the storytelling and everything else as long as the gunplay and the fights you're getting in are really, really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, after you get through the first story content bit of the game, it basically turns into a Mega Man game. So you get to go after all of the 8 different barons in any order you like. I mean, you don't necessarily get a weapon from each one that is strong against another one, but each of them has a different way that you kind of have to deal with them and fight with them. And the way they've structured that content, I'm a huge fan of. I think it's really cool. Yeah, but,
apparently the boss fights are really fun.
I've done like one that's leading up to them at the moment. That was pretty fun. I haven't sort of gotten into the 8 barons proper, but one of them being on a sort of jet scooter. What are they called? The pikes. That fills me with confidence that that's going to be a good bit of variety. So so far real good. The new sort of bounty system they've got, replacing all of the weekly content and the new dailies and that sort of stuff, really positive. I think that's great the way they've done that. The new sort of hub NPC in the Tangled Shore, a guy by the name of Spider, who's actually a fallen dude. He is awesome, like really, really cool character to add into the game. Yeah, I'm a big fan of everything so far. I think Destiny 2 is very exciting right now, which fills me with a lot of joy.
Crazy conspiracy theory, but the fact that Spider is collecting ghost fragments and what is Cade 6's ghost right now?
Oh, yeah.
Right? I can't help but feel there might be a thing there, right?
There could be some stuff there. Yeah, definitely. There's actually a bit of mystery around some of the core stuff in there at the moment as well, like particularly your new supers. So it seems like they've time-gated those somewhat, because unlike the main story campaign where you can kind of go through and unlock all 3 of your different sort of supers, in a roundabout way, sort of before the end of the main campaign as you level up. This one, it seems that the bits that you get to unlock your first one, I don't think you're actually going to get enough of that resource again until like the following week reset or something like that. Like you just don't get them at all. So that's really bizarre. The fact that a lot of people running around out there have only got one of their new supers and probably aren't going to have access to the other 2 until the game's been out for a while. So it's kind of cool in a way, but means that the choice really matters. Like the one that you end up going with, you super have to think about it because you're not going to get the next one for a little while. So which is cool. There's
a bunch of stuff they have in place in their systems, which is kind of getting tangential, but like the brand new engrams that drop. Apparently there's an invisible buff that you get where it's like every day or every week you have a guarantee of one of those dropping. So they basically remove any random chance of them dropping. It will always drop at least one at the start of the week for you. And then that buff kind of fades over time as you get more and more engram drops. Because a whole bunch of players were trying to cheat the system because they were going into like adventures and that sort of thing and defeating bosses. The engram was dropping, but they weren't picking it up. They were leaving and coming back in so that they could kill the boss again and try and make another one drop. And Bungie was like, haha, sucks to be you. That doesn't work because it doesn't increase your odds of them dropping. That debuff, that buff basically disappears after the first time it drops, even if you haven't picked it up.
Gotcha.
So yeah, like really interesting stuff they're doing with their RNG systems. It's super interesting.
Yeah, some of the vendors as well, like some of the rare resources that they will actually sell you outright now, whereas before it was a bit of luck involved to get them. Now you can kind of buy them, but each time you buy another one, it doubles the price. So again, it reduces that usefulness of grinding for them in one big hit.
Yep.
So yeah, paces it out a bit. I like it. I think these systems are going to be ultimately good to get people coming back consistently over a period of time, as opposed to just splurging on the game and burning out quickly. So
yeah, for sure.
With their goal of keeping people in their garden, playing for as long as they possibly can, it definitely sort of supports that. So
yeah,
very smart. I like it. Good job so far, Bungie. Not bad at all.
Now it's time to hear some gaming news. Time for some gaming news.
All right, well, let's kick into a bit of news and then get into some serious Spider-Man talk, because obviously Spider-Man is the other game we play, but we're going to save that for the main segment. So, before then, there's been a bit of back and forth this last week about Nintendo announcing a Direct, and then they had to unfortunately postpone it because there was some pretty serious earthquakes over in Hokkaido in Japan. So just out of respect for all involved in that area, and because there was obviously a bit of disruption, they sort of delayed it. Now, one of the big things that was expected to be talked about at that Direct, and probably still will be when the Direct actually happens tomorrow, so by the time you listen to this, it would have been and gone already, is Nintendo's online services now have a confirmed launch date. And that is coming real soon. I think it's next week. What are we looking at? The 18th, I think? God damn it, I had this in front of me a second ago. All right, let's say the 18th, and I'll correct it later if I'm wrong. So the online services were originally scheduled for late September, so this is going to be second half of September technically, so they're on the mark for that. But not a lot of new information apart from that. Like, we still know there's going to be a bunch of old sort of NES games available as part of the sort of free play on the service. There's going to be a bunch of games that will be able to use cloud saves, but there's been some information coming out this week about that not being universal across all games, and that's sort of been a little concerning. So part of that could be that when those games were sort of built, that this infrastructure wasn't considered, and they maybe have some issues with content that saves, client side versus server side. Don't know. That could factor into it. But
Nintendo, they put out a statement saying that the decision is about ensuring fair play in some games. They don't want people to... There are some titles that could be exploited through save manipulation.
Yeah, they say that it could be used to unfairly affect online multiplayer rankings and things like that. So yeah, that's that's kind of concerning, because that, on one hand, you could assume that from this point onwards, most games will support cloud saves, but given that they've said that and that's their stance on it, it puts that seed of doubt in your mind to think that maybe this is actually deliberate and maybe not everything will. So
I think it's definitely deliberate. I mean, you have to take their word for it. That's what they've said. It is deliberate. So
yeah. I wonder how they're imagining that being a thing. Like, how can you manipulate cloud saves to impact on multiplayer standing? That's very strange. I can't imagine a situation. Obviously,
they said, for example, regain items that had been traded to other players as another one. So, there are certain ways of manipulating online games where you can trade an item, then quickly unplug your internet, and then it's synced on one side of the one client, but not the other client, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, and then reload the save, do it again. But
I guess that really depends on, like, for an individual game, that kind of depends on how they're doing their saves. Because, like, you can't do that in World of Warcraft, right? Like, you can't go and trade something to someone and be like, hey, here, I'm going to give you this thing, but then I'm going to log out halfway through the trade. Like, World of Warcraft doesn't care about that. And technically, that's a cloud save system, because your save isn't on your PC. So that's really strange to me. I don't know. That's interesting. Yeah. Maybe it's a limitation of the console.
Yeah, it could be. It could be one of those things. I mean, we already know that it's got a few issues with regards to how much save space it's got on it without the extra card expansions. But just confirming, it is the 18th. So there's going to be a 7-day free trial available on launch as well for people via the eShop. But I don't know, like, it'll depend on how they spin it at the direct and content that comes out over the next week. I mean, what most people need to remember is that, yes, this service has a pretty low cost. So they're only charging around the $20 mark for an entire year worth, which is, significantly less than, your PlayStation and your Xbox sort of live gold sort of subscriptions. But at the same time, this is something that is going to be gating people being able to play online with other people, and it didn't exist before this launched, so people could do that without paying. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We will see how that plays out over the coming days. But yeah, speaking of stuff out of Japan, another really interesting one caught my eye over the last day or so. So there is a game on the way called, it's under the tentative title at the moment of Project Judge.
Yeah, Don't know for
sure if this is...
also heard it called Judge Eyes.
Judge Eyes? Okay, all right. So it could end up being one of those or something entirely different by the time it launches. So now it's on the way from the makers of Yakuza, which, as you may imagine, got my ears perked up immediately because those games are friggin' awesome. Look-wise, it aesthetically looks quite similar to the recent Yakuza games, which also is quite promising. But this one is actually a bit of a Japanese sort of crime noir tale involving a detective as opposed to focusing on a character who's actually involved in the organised crime themselves. And I've seen it described as Ace Attorney meets Yakuza, which I'm just like...
I heard LA Noir as another comparison as well.
Yeah. Either way, sign me up for that shit. That sounds great. So, some really bizarre things about it. Sort of though, apparently, the guy who does the acting for the main character is actually a Japanese celebrity by the name of Takuya Kimura, who is a pop star and a celebrity over in Japan. He's he's been described as the Brad Pitt of Japan.
Oh, wow.
Which is interesting. So he's launched a bunch of fashion trends and, there's a lot of guys over there that apparently sort of emulate the way he sort of dresses and stuff. But then there's scenes of him in this game fighting goons with a vibrator. So I don't know. Just beating them up. Yeah, okay. So we will see. I think it's going to be, a good, healthy mix of that sort of cultural weirdness that we've come to expect.
For sure.
So Project Judge was announced it's like a pre-announcement as part of TGS, the Tokyo Game Show, which is coming up at the end of September. And there's another game that has been announced ahead of TGS as well, which is Project Awakening. And it's like a new medieval action RPG by Cygames. Now, Cygames, for anyone who doesn't know, which is probably a lot of people because they haven't really made console games before. They've just made some mobile games like the Grand Blue mobile games and Shadowverse, which is another collectible card game. This is their first kind of full 3D action console game. And it looks like Monster Hunter kind of game, or it actually reminds me a lot of, not Dragon's Crown, what was it called? Dragon's Dogma, the Capcom action RPG that they put out a bunch of years ago. Yeah, so really spiffy looking graphics. There's like a trailer of like a knight character in third person fighting some big monster thing. It looks pretty flashy, and so that's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on as well. Have either of you watched the trailer at all?
I've just saw a little bit of it before we started the show tonight, and the graphic style looks a lot less comic-y and a lot more sort of gritty realism than the Project Judge and that Yakuza stuff we were just talking about, which is cool.
Yeah.
So
it looks interesting. It really does remind me a lot of Dragon's Dogma, but which was a really cool game. So hopefully it's as good as that.
Nice. Cool. All right. Well, we got talking about a bit of a hot topic at the start of the week that kind of just missed our news cycle last episode. But Matt, I think it's time for us to have a bit of a chat about some of the artifact stuff that came out.
So in this week's goddammit Valve news.
This has been a running theme lately.
It really has. So there was an interview with a Valve developer, Jeep Barnett, if I'm pronouncing that first name correctly. I'm assuming it is. But he was asked whether or not there'd be moderation tools for artifact players in-game, as in reporting other people for foul language or censoring certain things and everything like that. And he basically turned around and said, no, there's not going to be any of that. It's just going to be an absolute free-for-all. So he basically cited this, there's this psychological factor. So what he said was, psychologically, we find that people misbehave when there is somebody else to observe them misbehaving, he says. But what to my response to that would be, well, if somebody's misbehaving and there's nobody around to observe them misbehaving, are they misbehaving? Or is this like a tree in the woods thing? You know, like, I don't know. It's so dumb. It just
really
feels like
dumb.
there's no justification for that, right?
It's
like,
stupid. And he goes, when it's a one-on-one game, what is my motivation for saying something awful? It's like, that's just absurd. Like, people are horrible in any situation, and you put them when online. Like, there's always the capacity for people to be awful. Like,
I think they've almost single-handedly wiped out a lot of their female audience with that one thing. It's just crazy.
Because I think you mentioned this, Christian, when we were talking about it. Like, one of the smartest things that Hearthstone did was remove the ability for either player to talk to each other and to force them to kind of be nice to each other, right?
Yeah, they've even made changes to that too, because they're worried about people trolling using the emotes that are in the system, like as restrictive as they are.
Yeah,
like
so
there was a sorry emote that got removed because people were using it ironically and really sticking it to their opponents before they landed the killing blow. So they took it out,
and they put
much
a
to the
timeout on it,
disdain of the entire country of Canada.
Yeah, yeah, and they made it so you can't spam the same emote more than like 3 times, so then there's like a cooldown before you can emote again. But even still, people try and abuse that system in Hearthstone, and in Hearthstone, they still can't stop the add the person as a friend after the game and then abuse them, which people get all the time. So many people, after you played a little bit of Hearthstone, just don't bother accepting friend requests because all they're going to do is flame you. But in Artifact, they're going to be able to do that from turn 1 because it's open chat with your opponent. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I see. I don't discipline my kids. I just don't hang around them, and if I'm not around them, they don't misbehave.
That's right.
Well, kids is another interesting factor on this too, because like I would have no problem with my boys playing Hearthstone once they're of an appropriate age.
That's a really good point.
There is no way in hell they are going to be getting anywhere near Artifact. This is not happening.
No.
So yeah, it's really disappointing. It's super tone deaf. There are definitely a precedent, even in live Magic the Gathering competition, for this kind of thing to be an issue. Like it's another barrier to entry for the game where people are going to feel like they're not in a safe environment. And man, as soon as I saw that interview, I was just like, what the fucking fuck? Come on, this is not rocket science.
It just sounds to me like, given how much Valve tries to step away from really taking action on any of their marketplaces or anything like that, or in their games, clearly now, it just feels like it's an excuse for laziness. Like they don't want to create the team necessary to actually police that game, because they're going to need to. Like you can't go and look at the sort of things that happen in like Dota and the like, and turn around and say, no, this is fine.
Dota doesn't have a toxic culture at all. What are you talking about?
Yeah, League of Legends, like these games, like they're team oriented, but you play World of Warcraft and you can't communicate directly with the enemy team, but they will still go out of their way to make it clear to you that they're trolling you. Like they will go and spit on you. They will say the stuff in their language that they know that will get across the language barrier. So, the whole Kek thing, everybody knows what Kek means in World of Warcraft. Like, it just really bothers me. There's no excuse for it. And psychologically, this totally makes sense. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
I do think, honestly, in the end, it won't be as massive an issue as we might worry, because I do believe that Valve will at least put in a toggle where you just switch off chat, like in the global settings. And I think that due to the overwhelming negative response, that may even be the default mode. It may be a situation where you toggle into chat. And then it will be an open battlefield for abuse. But I think at least they'll have an off switch, which will suck because it's a missed opportunity for them to actually cultivate positive interactions and reward sportsmanship. But there'll be an off switch, I believe.
Yeah. It's because the opposite is what we've kind of seen in becoming the norm in games now, right? Like you look at Destiny 2, and when that came to PC and it came out that there would actually be text chat. Like, people were like, oh, come on, no, because the best part about Destiny was the fact that you couldn't troll the people that you were fighting against. Like, the only way that you could troll them was with the emotes that Bungie gave you. And even then, it's all in good fun, right? In comparison to just being able to say rude things to other people. Like, the industry is moving in the opposite direction from what Valve says it is. So,
Yep.
A bit of fun news that I wanted to mention. So this was a story that I read about something that went on in Elite Dangerous, which is like an online space sim, kind of like No Man's Sky, kind of like more maybe closer to EVE Online than No
Like
Man's
Eve
Sky.
Light.
Like EVE Light, yeah. But there's this really interesting story about they added some new ship into the game. I'm probably going to butcher this because I don't play it myself, but the gist of it is they added some new ship into the game. It's like a mega ship, and it has the ability to jump further than any previous ship, like warp jump. And so players got the idea that they were all going to sort of work together. There's about 11,000 players, and they were going to use this new ship's capabilities to launch into previously unexplored space, this area called the Cone Sector, which is like this locked off area that they discovered they could technically get to if they pooled enough resources and used this new ship. And it took them, I think, a combined like 10,000 hours of player time, or everyone pooling their resources, thousands of ship captains coming together to, I don't understand exactly what they were doing because I don't know the mechanics, but took a shit ton of time, and all to do this massive launch into this unexplored zone. And the devs were very aware of it, and they were posting like updates in the sort of Frontier chat, or like there's like a news bulletin system, and they were kind of acknowledging it in this news bulletin system. It's called the Galnet. And then the players on their launch day, they set sail to this Cone Sector, but then there's like this alien environmental hazard called the Thargoids, and their entire fleet got attacked by the Thargoids, and like it turned into this massive battle, and their expedition was completely like thwarted. And as it turns out, it was impossible for the players to ever actually get to their destination. Like, this area of space hasn't been like built to allow players to enter it. It's not something that it's not something the game actually supports. And it was verging on like an exploit that like the devs kind of hadn't anticipated, that if the players put in this much time and this much effort, they could technically get to that area of space.
So this is a bit of artificial gatekeeping by them then.
It is artificial gatekeeping, yeah. So, and this is an interesting question that I wanted to talk about this news item. So, there's a couple of ways the devs could have handled it. As soon as they got wind that players were planning to do this, they could have said, actually, no, stop, don't waste your time. This isn't possible. Or they could have done what they did, which is kind of make it more thematic and embrace it, but then have an in-game sort of reason that it failed with this Thargoid invasion. And that's what they went with, and players felt kind of ripped off that they wasted that amount of time. But what do you guys think? Do you think that the devs should have handled it differently?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have a better idea than just they should have just said that it was impossible from the start?
No, I don't think they should have said it was impossible from the start. I think they had the right idea by kind of encouraging the experimentation by players, but then going and I'm just going to use the term, they're going and effectively cock blocking their players from having that reward with it's okay, like this is your reward, we're going to kick your ass. Like, no, that's not cool. That's really not cool. Like you need to kind of reward players for doing that sort of thing. Like it kind of feels reminiscent of the airfield in World of Warcraft. So like around Ironforge, there was this airfield that if you took a flight point between Ironforge and this other place, you would fly over this airfield. It was always on fire, and there were a whole bunch of dwarves running around. And it's like, I want to go there. That looks like this incomplete story zone that Blizzard's gone and made. And sure enough, people found a way to glitch up into it. And there weren't any quests or anything there. And Blizzard came out later on and said, yeah, no, those zones we created just to have something neat to look at while you're flying over it. Like, they didn't go out of their way to prevent players obviously getting in there. They tried to prevent players from getting in there. But it was their own reward in a way for getting in there. Like, even if this space was incomplete and players jumped into it and ended out in a black void with nothing there, that would be really cool. Yeah. Like, that would be awesome. They wouldn't even have to put anything specific in there. Depending on how long it took players to actually get there, like, I could totally understand the devs having to pivot really quickly if it was like 24 hours, the players announce their plan and then 24 hours later they can do it, because that's not really a lot of dev time.
This article says weeks, so...
If there was weeks, there's no excuse. Like, they could have totally put something there that the players could have jumped into and then pushed them back, so that, drop some hint as to what's in that zone and reward players for getting there, and then, like, spit them back out to where they came from, but give them a clue as to what they can expect from that area in future. Because now, like, players are just going to be annoyed with the devs. And there's even less answers about what's in that zone. It's just that now they know the devs don't want them to go there at all. So it feels like a real missed opportunity to kind of build some hype about, this is what you can expect in future,
You got to wonder if they're going to attempt it again.
Yeah.
You got to wonder.
I reckon that if I was a player, I'd be like, okay, well, clearly the devs don't even want me to try, so I'm not going to bother.
Yeah.
So.
The official statement was, the dev said, without revealing too much about this area of space, the cone sector, both in content and in in-game lore, was always meant to be locked off. The fact that certain systems within the sector weren't locked was an oversight from before it was possible for megaships to make such jumps. So definite oversight, and but I do definitely think they could have done something more creative, like you're saying, Matt.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree with everything that Matt said, but I'm also a massive hypocrite, because if I was one of the devs, I would have loved the shit out of trolling them. That would have been hilarious. So.
Okay.
And they did at least debut a new type of enemy in that attack, a new type of Thargoid, so I guess that's some sort of reveal.
It's the devs.
Yeah, it's the devs. Yeah.
No, I totally get that. Like, I totally get the trolling. The trolling as a dev would be really, really funny. But at the same time, like... all the news that was kind of backing it up, that feels like going and suddenly jumping in there and dropping the whole bunch of enemies on the players at the end of it, fine, but don't build up the players along the way with all the news, because if you're going out there, they probably
could have done. They could have actually given half of the player base an incentive to stop the other half.
Yeah, no, they totally could have.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
That's usually how EVE Online sort of winds up, these huge intergalactic battles. So,
or even start like hinting that what they're doing is creating this issue with the Thargoids. Right?
They did say they dropped hints that Thargoids were in the area. So that's something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like a real missed opportunity either way. Like, if it was an oversight, then lean into that oversight, right? Like, basically say, if it's a locked off area and there's like some old, galactic superpower that forgot to lock the door, then, play into that. Totally play into that.
Elite Dangerous, Civil War. That's what
But in terms of other news, a little piece that I just wanted to very, very briefly cover. Polygon's said goodbye to review scores, which I think is actually a really good move, personally. I think that it removes a bit of bias, especially with how Polygon was doing their reviews typically. Obviously, no review is ever going to be completely unbiased, but their review scores were always like, the reviewer would write their feelings and then somebody else would be reading over that and applying a review score to it. That's how I understand Polygon did their reviews previously. And it kind of ended out in some situations where there were some review scores that I would be like, this seems like the person that put the review score on this review read into some of the negative points more than the positive ones, and so they've given it a more negative review score than I would have given it, having read that review. So having gotten rid of that, I think that just leaning into their writing is a much smarter move, because I was talking about it earlier. I had a very bad habit of just going on Polygon and then looking at the review score and saying, okay, cool, and then closing the page and not reading anything of their review. So
yeah, interesting thought on that though. When you think about the revenue model behind a lot of these sites, your Polygons, your GameSpots, your Kotakus, et cetera, your IGNs, like the reason why you see a degradation in terms of their content quality over recent years is, really leaning into this advertising model that the internet has embraced, where everything is very much based on getting the most clicks as possible, because that's what brings in the revenue. Now, I think that they would have run the numbers on this, as any sort of intelligent business would, and realized how many people actually visit their articles just for that score, because they'd be able to get metrics on, amount of time spent on those pages and the point of entry and that kind of stuff. So I'm very curious by removing scores, how much of a potential hit they're going to be taking of the number of people that won't click onto those pages to actually have a look at that number and then disappear. Like it's all well and good for them to want people to read the article, but I think that most people who would read the article probably would have read the article before, and maybe, now they're going to be cutting off, a bit of their audience in terms of people who just come for that quick hit. So I'm really curious.
I don't think this is going to make people who didn't read the article before read the article. It's because it's just going to cut the people out who just skip straight to the score.
Yeah.
But I think that Polygon can get away with it because they are one of the sort of more premier sites for non-review based content. So they just do tons of articles and guides and all sorts of stuff that they'll still get tons of clicks on. And I think that, like you say, look, they would have run the numbers and thought other content can support the loss that we'll receive from people who would just skip to the review score. So
if they do a good summary, it will still do the same job, I suppose. Like people will still skip into the page just for the pros and cons bullet points. So
But there's also, like, in terms of advertising, like, you're not only getting paid for those clicks onto the page, you're also getting paid for conversions where people are clicking on the actual advertising, which they're more likely to do if they're on the page longer. So I do think that in the long term, it actually is probably benefiting them financially. Like, if people are on that page longer, they're probably more likely to click onto an ad. So
it does make you wonder which site will be next to follow suit, because, in the day and age that we are in today where, content is released and it's only a snapshot of what it's like at that moment. Like, stuff evolves a lot since the point of release these days. Particularly with anything that's a game as a service or, subsequent patches and DLC and, ports to different systems. It is not the same game when it comes to reviewing that it once was. It is very, very different. So
I predict IGN would be the last people to take away their review scores.
I was actually going to make a joke about, like, if IGN gets rid of their review scores, we can't make jokes anymore about IGN gave this a 7 out of 10. Like,
too much water.
Giant Bomb actually made some changes to their reviews this week as well. Like they've been doing a 5-star sort of approach for the longest time, which is accompanied by an article. And their articles are usually a pretty good read because there's a decent amount of humour and a lot of realism sort of mixed in there. But they've actually flipped that over to doing a video review format now. So that's very interesting too. Reading through and they have been sort of spending a good sort of 20 minutes, half an hour on the review video for Spider-Man at the very least, which, gives a much better context to a lot of the stuff that's going on. You get to see it, you get to listen to a conversation as opposed to just a one-sided sort of, person reading from a script. More of this, I think, is good. Like, I would love to see everybody go down this route. I don't think everybody will, like you said, but the more the better.
I mentioned it while we were discussing it briefly before. Shout out to GameCloud and the fact that I really approve of how they do their reviews. Like, the recommended, not recommended, or it's complicated, that's perfect. Like, that's all I need to know. So,
super good. All right, gentlemen, it is time. Shall we jump in? Shall we swing into action? Let's do it. All right, so if you've gotten this far, then no doubt you are here to listen to our party-loaded review of Marvel's Spider-Man. And it is Marvel's Spider-Man. That is the full name. We can't just abbreviate it to Spider-Man because apparently that's going to cause too much confusion.
And it's Spider-Man.
Yes, the hyphen is very important, I've been told. All right, so now our intention for this segment is, for the most part, we're going to give a completely story spoiler-free discussion. But towards the end, and we will highlight when this is happening so you can skip the necessary part and avoid it, we are going to get into maybe a couple of things that are a little spoiler risky, but we will give you a big warning before we kick that in. And, basically, it's your own fault if you keep listening. So we'll be safe for the rest of it. So don't worry. We're going to be talking about sort of game impressions and mechanics and, some of the characters in a basic sense, like, but not giving away any more than you would have gotten from the broadcast gameplay or story footage that came out before the game was launched. So, Cool. All right. So, basic game info. We know it's a PlayStation 4 exclusive. We know that it is the first Spider-Man game we have seen in quite some time, and we know that it is developed by Insomniac Games, who have also been known for such titles as
Ratchet and Clank,
Ratchet and Clank. What's the one I'm just thinking of? Sunset Overdrive is the other more recent one. Yeah. So, yes, they've got a bit of pedigree. I think this is probably their biggest foray into a first-party PlayStation title to date. Like this is definitely the largest and most prestigious thing that they've been given to work on, and thankfully, it seems they did a pretty fucking good job.
Yeah. Most of Insomniac's stuff in past, I'm pretty sure, has just been their kind of own internal titles, like their own IP.
They seem to have had this kind of second-party relationship with Sony for a long time, where all the Ratchet and Clank games and Resistance games were all Sony exclusive, but Insomniac isn't owned by Sony, and then they went and did Sunset Overdrive, which was their first Xbox exclusive, and now they're back in Sony's capable hands.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I can't help but imagine that might be because Sunset Overdrive didn't land very well.
Yeah, it definitely didn't.
Yeah, which is a shame because that game actually had some fun bits in it. I got to play a bit of it and I actually quite warmed to it, but it did sort of suffer from being one of those very, very early generation games where it was forgotten immediately as soon as something more substantial came along. So
it probably didn't land very well because the Xbox One didn't land very well.
Yes, that could also have something to do with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Well, in terms of the game style, I mean, Matt, this is pretty much your playground. This is the open world kind of action RPG that you're a big fan of. So, how would you describe the rest of the game style?
Like I would, having played it, it's a love letter to Spider-Man. Like, there's so much about, especially like Spider-Man in the last decade, I think.
Yeah.
There's so much in there that you're running around and you're experiencing, and most of I'm not a comic book reader myself. Most of the stuff that I'm seeing in there, for the longest time, I'm like, this could totally be a Spider-Man game that exists in the Marvel Cinematic Universe until 100%. MJ turned up and was not Latino. Like, that was the point at which I'm like, okay, yeah, so this is something totally different. It's something completely new. Because there are suits in there that have a lot of ties back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff. Like, hell, we knew about the Iron Spider-Man suit, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. The Iron Spider suit. Like, that was a pre-order bonus. And, like, it comes with the awesome arms and everything, and it looks fantastic. Like, that exists in the game, right? It's just like, it feels like there's so many ties, and this could be an older Peter Parker. He even looks like the actor.
Yeah.
Like, but there's also a whole bunch of other stuff in there that like callbacks to the comics and such.
It totally feels like it rides a line between the MCU and like its own incarnation. It's almost like an alternate reality MCU where it could so easily be from that universe if just a couple of things were different.
I was going to say the MJ thing is a weird one, like because obviously the MJ character at the end of Spider-Man: Homecoming was kind of a different take on it. I mean, aside from the fact that maybe there could be an MJ and a separate Mary Jane that had the same initials, I mean, you could maybe get away with that. But, the Avengers Tower is another weird one because in Homecoming, they're kind of disassembling Avengers Tower. So the building's still there, but it doesn't have the big A on it anymore because the building's been sold kind of thing.
Yeah.
So a little bit of continuity issues.
This game's definitely much further into the future as far as Spider-Man's own timeline goes. Like, it's
supposed
still
to be 8
2018.
years. He's been Spider-Man for 8 years, yeah.
Yeah, which is a lot longer than he has been Spider-Man in the MCU. So there's some difference there.
But he also, when you actually go to Avengers Tower and actually take a photo of it, he actually comments on the fact that nobody's been there in a while and maybe they're all over on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Which I think is where the new Avengers base is, if I'm not mistaken. Like, there's so many things where it's like, is that actually hinting that this exists in the same universe? I'm still not convinced. Like it feels like there's so much in common that's just slightly different. Like, I could totally buy the alternate reality thing, right? Like, I could totally buy that. But, there's so many callbacks. It's strange. I love it, though.
Well, the multiverse stuff is certainly a comic book thing, so
yeah.
and who knows what's going to happen at the end of Infinity War Part 2 as well, so we just don't know. Yeah.
I mean,
that had a whole, is it Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions or whatever it was? That one of the previous Spider-Man games was all about alternate Spider-Man dimensions. You played in 4 different versions of Spider-Man. There was like the noir one and futuristic one, and so Spider-Man especially has toyed around with timeline stuff.
Well, there's also that upcoming animated movie, which is going to be Into the Spider-Verse, which is going to touch on all of that. So,
which looks really cool.
Yeah.
But there's of course it has a whole bunch of stuff that the cinematic universe has, not just in terms of like story, but also in terms of the stuff the cinematic universe does. Like I've heard that there's post and mid-credit stuff. And there's the cameo that you kind of expect from cinematic universe things.
And the score is actually, like, the main theme is so reminiscent of, like, the Avengers theme. It's very similar.
Yeah. It's really cool. I really like the kind of blending between the cinematic universe stuff and a lot of comic book stuff. I really like that.
It does have sort of callbacks to the entire Spider-Man cinematic universe as well, like not just the MCU movies. Yeah, definite references to some of the other earlier Raimi Spider-Man films.
There's a great one.
Yeah, there are truly some excellent moments.
The delivery of James Jonas Jameson is totally like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Like that's totally him.
Yeah.
So.
Shout out to Darren DePaul as well, who also voiced Reinhardt for Overwatch, because he does the voice for Jonah. Holy shit, he knocked it out of the park. What a fucking great voiceover for that character.
It's so funny. Oh my god, I love it when he turns up.
Yeah, unbelievable. I think overall my feel on the style of game it was yes, a love letter to Spider-Man, but I think in a lot of ways it was inadvertently a love letter to the Arkham series as well, because there was a lot of similarity. Yeah, I really do think so. Particularly Arkham City. I think that I was reminded of that game a lot. And what I mean by that is, you do have a lot of those really cool sort of mechanical boss fights to sort of get around. There's a lot of story beats in amongst the sort of running around the city doing various different things. The city traversal stuff, like Batman has the grapple gun and sort of glides. Spider-Man swings, which is, if you were to compare the two, the Spider-Man mode of traversal is a lot more fun, but still quite similar in that they encourage you to get up high and then kind of go to where you need to go. And then you sort of end up doing, a combination of sort of stealth takedowns and then getting in on the ground and brawling and that kind of thing. So I do think that there are a lot of similarities between the two game styles. If you've enjoyed the Arkham games, you will definitely enjoy this kind of take on Spider-Man as well. Because
I do agree, especially talking about like the stealth takedowns and the traversal and stuff. Because sort of more broadly speaking, it feels just very cookie cutter open world RPG to me. Like, I don't think that the open world stuff it does as far as like side missions and collectibles and that's not, it's not sort of riffing Arkham in that sense, but that's kind of just riffing the wider genre. But talking about the more details there, I do see how it is very Arkham-like in that way.
I think for me the traversal, there's less comparisons because like the traversal in this is. It's so unique to Spider-Man, the way that you get around, and it's incredibly satisfying. But
they nailed it.
The stealth is absolutely Arkham all over.
Yeah, you mean like the stealth combat, right? Like,
the stealth combat.
Yes.
The Spidey stealth, we'll call
it. The Spidey stealth stuff, It's very
Secret
Arkham.
Spider.
Spidey stealth is absolutely Arkham. It's Arkham all over. Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's really good.
I think probably the biggest difference in terms of the traversal, and this kind of ties into the stealth takedowns from above as well, is then Batman, there's a very, very finite sort of range of traversal points where you can kind of like grapple up to a gargoyle and drop down from there. But there's always like a very clear number of spots in any given room where you can do that from. With Spider-Man, it's a lot more broad. Like they've actually coded the traversal points into a huge range of surfaces. And shout out to whoever actually had to put the time in to do that, because over the entire city, holy shit, that would have been a job. That's a lot of traversal points to code in. So
I'm pretty sure that most of that will have been put in there programmatically. So
algorithmically,
algorithmically, that's a better word for it. Like it will just be saying, okay, well this counts as a ledge, so Spider-Man can get on it. Like that, I'm pretty sure that's the only way they could have done it, because otherwise, doing that manually, oh my god, the city's huge.
I do have one minor issue with the stealth combat, which it is really good, but it has a problem that a lot of stealth games have where. It's a lot quicker usually just to jump in and beat the shit out of everybody. Like I'd often find myself like jumping around, webbing people up and doing like the safe takedowns, and it was satisfying, but it's just always quicker just to jump in and start beating the crap out of people. Like you rarely need to do the stealth stuff, only if there's like an optional objective that's like get 5 stealth takedowns or something. But that's just me. But
I would agree with you if it wasn't for one thing, and that's that there are definitely enemies equipped with gear that fucks you up in a sense that you need to stealth take down them first so that you can brawl effectively. Like, particularly later on in the game, you come up against, like, the mode of combat for Spider-Man, you are always better staying in the air if you can. Like, it's just one of those things where you're at your best when you're flinging dudes up in the air and, like, jumping up and punching them, down again and staying out of, melee range of a lot of the other stuff on the ground and just sort of flipping around like that. There are a couple of enemies in particular that can rip you out of the air and bring you down to ground, and taking them out stealthily before you start a big fight is always the better way to go if you can manage it, I found.
Well, I think there's always alternate ways of taking them down. They electrocute them or swing kick and then pull them down, something like that. I don't think there's any enemies that you need to stealth take down, really.
Not 100%, but it makes it a lot easier.
Like, I would have agreed with you, except for the fact that the stealth challenge mode missions that pop up taught me so much about doing stealth quickly.
Yeah, they taught me about what I can get away with,
Yeah. Like the web grenade, holy crap. Web grenade is so good for stealth because it prevents enemies from calling for help. So you just toss that in a group and then jump down in there, and you have a couple of seconds within which you can just beat the crap out of them without them alerting their friends, and then zip back away, and you still haven't actually set off an alarm. Like,
there's also a spider suit that has the same power. Like, you can actually activate it where it stops the enemies from calling for support. Yeah.
But those missions taught me a lot about, okay, I can actually use stealth quickly, and I can be kind of messy in comparison to, like, doing Splinter Cell or anything like that, where, okay, I've been discovered, okay, that's all over. In Spider-Man, like, you have a lot more kind of leeway in terms of not being discovered, and there's even actually a suit mod that reduces your ability to be discovered. Like, I haven't even been using that, but there's definitely a way to do stealth quickly. But yeah, like, snipers, I hate dealing with snipers. If I can take snipers out quietly, that makes everything easier because you can't dodge them. So.
They're usually isolated too, so they're not too hard to pick off in quick succession if you can get used to it. Yeah.
What do you guys think of the general sort of scattering of open world, like, missions and objectives? Like, how well do you think they balance that? What do you think of the variety in the different objectives and tasks? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I've seen a lot of complaining about it online this week. But for my part, I actually don't agree with those complaints at all. I think they've done a fantastic job with it. And I've listened to a bunch of the whinges about it, and most of them I really completely disagree with, I've got to say. Like, I think one of the things that they really do well in this game, with maybe one or two notable exceptions, is that all of the... Actually, I want to just get the terminology clear here. So you've got your critical path sort of missions, which are usually indicated by, like, an orange or a yellow diamond on the map. You've got your blue side missions, so blue diamonds on the map, and then you've got all of the other sort of, I'll call them tertiary sort of objectives. Yeah. So, running around collecting backpacks, all these challenge bits, taking out bases, all that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to the critical path story and the side missions, I think the side missions are actually really, really good in this game for the most part. I think that there's actually, there's, even to the extent that there's a couple of major boss battles that happen during side missions that you wouldn't get to if you sort of just did the critical path. So it's absolutely important to do as much of that stuff as you can. And a lot of the time, the story kind of ties into the critical path stuff too, so it is very relevant with what's going on in the game. When it comes to tertiary objectives, I think one of the things they did really well with most of them is that they actually all have a purpose in terms of what you get out of it in the game and what it actually gives you in terms of either supporting the story, teaching you how to use your abilities, or generally, making you better at being Spider-Man. So, like, the backpacks are a classic example of this. So normally something like... running around and collecting these sort of hidden caches around the map might seem like a bit of busy work. But the fact that it actually ties into the story nicely, like where there's these backpacks that actually exist because Peter, over the many, many years of being Spider-Man, every time he needs to basically dump his clothes and suit up and go and, like, stop a crime immediately, he's got to do something with his bag, right? So he usually webs it to a wall wherever he is or whatever, and, he doesn't always necessarily go back to get them. I think it makes perfect sense that there's that many of them out there. And the way that you actually discover them on the map, I think, also makes perfect sense. And in addition to that, you might think to yourself, how the hell has this kid got so many backpacks? That is also explained. So, it's actually really, really funny the way they tie that in. And in every single one of those backpacks, you get sort of... bits of either bits of tech or little components that tell a story that actually reinforce the sort of whole tale of what Spider-Man's been up to over the last 8 years.
Yep.
And it tells you a lot about some of the enemies that he's faced over that period of time as well, without actually having to include them in the main story of the game.
Yeah, I really like that they all have voice acted descriptions. I really like that.
So that stuff's great.
I'll preface my opinion by saying that I still haven't finished the game, but I have completed every single side mission and every single collectible mission and all the other little missions that are in the game world. All that's on my map right now is the main mission stuff. I've completed everything else.
Even the crimes? You've done all the crimes and all the zones?
Not all the crimes, because you can't track the crimes, and that's a different issue I have with the game. But
we should talk about the crimes separately in a minute, because I've got some stuff to say about that, yeah.
Yeah, so I do agree with Luke. I think that the complaints about a lot of the open world, those little missions, are totally misplaced.
I agree with Luke too, for the record.
Yeah, but they're not always great. There's some in there that are really not good. If I'm chasing down a pigeon as Spider-Man, that's awesome. It's actually really fun because I'm getting to do the thing that Spider-Man is, what the game does best, which is being Spider-Man. Swinging around and doing all that is really, really cool. If I'm going and doing a mission where all I really need to do is swing through some clouds or whatever, and then that's kind of the end of the mission, that's a little bit more boring and less exciting than chasing a pigeon, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
So the quality varies a lot. But there were never any side missions where I was like, that was awful. Why the hell was that in the game? At no point.
You said the quality varies a lot, and that's important because there's still got the word varies in there. So what you're doing is still varying. There's very little repetition outside of the crimes. There's very little repetition in the tasks that you're doing. The research stations, I was expecting there to be templates for those that you do over and over again, but they're all 100%. Different.
Yeah. I think there's one repeated one only. It's the cloud one. I think you do that twice, but all the others are completely unique. Yeah. Which is cool.
Even the challenges, which the challenges do have I think 4 different types maybe, but they're all still reasonably varied in the setups and the sort of arrangement of the particular scenario.
The only thing I'll say about the research station missions, though, I think which bears mention, is that the narrative behind why they're there, I think, is kind of cool. Because it ties into one of the other sort of side characters that you're wondering sort of where they are in terms of the Spider-Verse and what their role is in the current world setup. Yeah. But the thing I didn't like about the research station ones is it basically gives you this information about an environmental issue or some sort of hazard that's kind of going on that needs looking after or research or solving, and then all of a sudden almost all of them turn into this immediate life or death scenario, and you're just how the fuck did this suddenly become a lethal situation?
This thing monitors pressure. Oh shit, the pressure's overflowing right now, this second.
It doesn't make any sense. I totally agree with that, but at the same time, I think the best thing about all of the collectibles and side missions and everything like that, the little story mission things, there's always a narrative reward for them, even if you're just collecting backpacks. The backpacks probably have the biggest narrative reward, and they're probably the least interesting thing to go out and collect. But they're made one of the most interesting because every single backpack you get has a really neat little story snippet, and it's awesome. Yeah. I love that.
It's not feathers in Assassin's Creed.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, every mission and every little thing that you collect is actually worth doing because it's exciting to do so. And even the challenges that, the stealth challenges in particular, I was like, I'm not sure I want to do those. But then they all get placed in different areas with different surroundings that pose different challenges as to how you approach them. Mm-hmm. And they teach you to be better at the game. And then that ends in a really cool narrative boss fight reward that is fantastic.
Which is really friggin' hard.
When you complete it, though, it's so satisfying.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Without spoilers as to who that is or anything, I love that the first time you fight that person, they're like, I fought the Avengers, bitch.
Holy shit.
I love that.
I do have some questions around how Spidey can, at the speed that he swings across the city, manage to web a pigeon out of midair and not kill that poor bird. That just blows my mind.
He learned after Gwen Stacy. He improved.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I do get an awesome photo, like a selfie with one of the pigeons. Like I managed to capture it in the exact moment that it's like in his arms. It's brilliant.
Oh wow. Okay, that would have taken some doing. Holy crap. All right. Well, the crimes are something we should talk about as well. So there's a bunch of kind of random crime situations that happen across the city, and they go through different phases as you go through the game, and different sort of enemies get involved in the city at large. Like the groups of people that you're fighting against, sort of starts with common criminals, and then you have to deal with some of the demons gang, which you see in the big trailer. So the guys wearing the masks that you would have seen in a lot of the sort of E3 footage, and then other stuff later on as well. So and the way that these play out, there's a good variety of different crimes going on, and what you actually have to do to sort of solve the situation. Like some of them are really basic, street brawls. You just have to drop down and beat up all the dudes that are sort of, currently in a shootout with cops or something like that. But some of them are really, really cool. Like chasing down high-speed sort of, vehicle pursuits and actually trying to stop the cars, like saving people who are actually, trapped under, burning rubble as there's been an accident, and, various bits and pieces that are so Spider-Man in their nature. Like, I think it's one of the biggest improvements over, like, something like the Arkham games, because in the Arkham games, it very much just is mobs of dudes on the ground that you just sort of drop down, you beat up a whole bunch of guys, you get some experience, and that's kind of the main reason to do it. But with Spider-Man, there is a real motivation to actually go down and act as a crime fighter, and sort of deal with these situations, and it ties into the J. Jonah Jameson sort of voiceover stuff as well, because his talk show, his radio station, will actually go into narrative about some of the stuff that you do, and if you actually swing past a crime and actually don't help out whoever's sort of needing your assistance, he will basically give you shit on air for not doing that. So it's amazing. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think that the crimes are something that I can imagine people complaining about, because it is the most repetitive content in the game. But I also think that it's fine for that level of content to be in there. Like, it's okay in an open world game to have sort of just general crime stopping that you do a couple of, over and over again, because that should be in the game. If there was no Spider-Man just being regular Spider-Man, it would feel a bit odd. So I think that it's fine. And there is an ultimate limitation to, it's not infinite. It doesn't just go on forever and ever. Even though there's more of that than any of the other tasks. But I think it's fine personally.
Yeah. So my take on it is, the combat is the best part of Marvel's Spider-Man, the game, and all those missions about dealing with crime involve combat. So I am perfectly happy to just do those all day. Like, I will just keep on doing them repeatedly. If there's a crime, I will rush off, and I can be on the way to doing some big important mission that's super time sensitive, and there'll be somebody getting mugged nearby, and I'm just like, Spider-Man wouldn't ignore that. He would go and deal with that, and then go and deal with the big threat, right? So I would always do those. The only problem I have with the crime missions is that, one, it doesn't... There's challenges around the crime missions that are like, web up so many guys from stealth, or knock out so many guys by throwing them into the air and webbing them against a wall, right? But to get that interface is really clunky, and sometimes it just appears randomly and it's helpful, and other times it doesn't actually appear until you actually finish the crime, and it's like, well, I would have really enjoyed knowing that sooner. That's one of the problems I have. The other problem is that clearly there's a finite amount, and given how every other system works, it feels like there's probably a reward for completing all of them, but I have no way of knowing where they're taking place and when. Like, there's nothing on my map that says there's a crime taking place right here unless I'm in the general vicinity, which means that if I want to do a 100% completionist run, I'm going to have to swing all the way around the city and just wait for a crime to turn up in an area where I haven't completed everything.
Well, I mean, it's district by district, right? So you just need to swing within the district, like there's the map zone that you haven't completed. And I feel like it doesn't take too long for one to trigger if you haven't finished all of a category.
I think they'll continue cropping up even if you go past the limit recommended by that sector. Like, I'm pretty sure it'll just continue rolling.
No, I've noticed already sectors that I clear that those crimes stop in that area.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
So-
You can make the city safe.
Yes.
Wow,
So
okay.
there's,
That's cool.
There's enemies that also just kind of pop up on the streets later on in the game.
That's different. Yeah.
That aren't attached to crimes. But the game actually makes a point of saying that if you clear those out, those also don't come back. So you can actually take out everything in the city that is aggressive, and the same goes for crimes. There's a finite amount of crimes and enemies that can exist in New York. Eventually, Spider-Man can crush all of it.
Wow. That's cool. So,
you
Matt,
mentioned-
in relation to the challenge stuff, like, were you aware you can actually toggle that on and off? There's,
The challenge stuff in terms of like...
the list of what you have to do during a fight.
Oh,
like, if you
yeah.
push R3, you can just display it.
I did not know that.
There you
Okay,
go.
that's handy.
I was
but
going to mention that too.
I haven't actually seen any notification for that.
I agree.
So.
It wasn't particularly intuitive. Yeah. No, that's
it
it.
would've been- it would've been good to
unless
know
you do it
that.
by accident. Sorry, just going to say one other thing. I do agree with your sort of role play linked though, in terms of like going around and acting like Spider-Man. Like I was the same. Like as I was swinging around, if I saw a crime happening, I was in the headspace of Spider-Man, as in I am a crime fighter. I should do this because it's the right thing to do, rather than because I felt compelled to for mechanical reasons. And because I'm Spider-Man, I also thought that it was appropriate to stop a drug deal on the roof of a building and kick all of the drug dealers off to their deaths. So
He always webs into safety. Always.
I know.
He always webs into safety. It's great. But there's also like I take my roleplay very seriously, and so I would also wear appropriate clothing as Spider-Man. Like running around in some of the suits, I'm like, why would Spider-Man wear that? Like, this feels a little bit edgy for my Spider-Man. But then stuff happens in the story, and I'm like, you know what? Now's probably a good time for edge.
It's true.
My problem with the alternate suits are too many of them are black. Too
Yeah.
many black suits.
Yeah,
There's-
there are
there's-
quite a
Doesn't photograph as well.
There's a suit that I adore because it looks so cool, but whenever I wear it, I'm like, oh my god, I stick out like a sore thumb and I hate it. I can't wear it. I just, I love the way it looks, but I hate the way it looks in the game. So, yeah.
I must admit, I stuck with the default with the white accentuation suit for the entire game run, just because I thought it looked better.
Yeah.
Played maybe half of it with that. A lot. I alternated between that and the Iron Spider probably the most.
Yeah.
The Iron Spider at least like looks like Spider-Man. Like it's not like crazy different skin with weirdness on it. So
Yeah,
true.
I alternated between the white Spider-Man and the Stark suit, which I don't think is a spoiler. So
No. People know that's definitely in there. Yeah, so that was cool. I mean, side content aside, should we talk about some of the visuals and sort of give our impressions on how they've actually represented New York as a city? So did you guys spend a lot of time kind of as you were traversing around sort of stopping and pausing and actually doing things like looking inside some of the windows and just seeing how much detail they put in?
yeah, looking in the windows was really impressive. It's crazy. Like I think that as far as open worlds go, this is one of like the highest fidelity, most impressive open worlds I've seen. It's just amazing, and not just the level of detail, but the polish on things like view distance and like aliasing, and like just graphically, it looks stunning. I just adore just swinging around any time of day. It's just fantastic.
personally, I think that they really dropped the ball on how many puddles are in the game.
Stop it!
No, I can't say I can compare it myself to the real world New York, but I can certainly compare it to the narrative New York from the cinematic universe, and they nail the Marvel Cinematic Universe New York. Like, there's so many little things in the game that you can go and find and just, take photos of that are like, oh wow, it's really cool that they put that in the game. Like, just little callbacks, not only to the cinematic universe stuff, but also the Netflix shows and everything. Like, it's all there.
Oh yeah.
Like,
So much
that's
stuff.
really cool. And the fact that it looks so similar to those places is just fantastic. Like, the world is so dense with stories, and that's really cool. Also, just the fact that, I'm a little bit disappointed that as Spider-Man, I can't walk down the city streets and just like wave at people and high five random strangers, because I need random strangers to approach me for a high five to give them high fives. like, I would also have really appreciated it if I could take selfies without having to do it in photo mode, so I could take selfies with just random passers-by. I think that'd be really cute. But, like, that's tiny compared to just how wonderfully immersed in being Spider-Man it feels to
and
be.
how New York it is. Like it's just so wonderfully New York, just from like the way it's portrayed. Because Spider-Man and New York are like just linked together so well.
Yeah.
And it just feels awesome.
Yeah, it is
for
super
sure.
good. The visuals, the only weird couple of things that I encountered, I otherwise completely agree with everything you said. And in terms of the parody to real world New York, I just today, in fact, saw some photos comparing the two, and I was just shocked at how close that they'd gotten it. Like there was some one-to-one parody with some of the fine details that you wouldn't have expected them to bother with. But the couple of weird visual glitches that I did encounter, one was to do with the boats that are sort of zipping around outside of the city limits. If you swing out to them and manage to pause the camera and when you're entering into photo mode at the right moment and actually have a look at some of the character figures on those boats, it's clear where they cut the corners because they are very much boxed sort of
They look like
models.
N64 characters.
Yeah,
Like
it was kind
GoldenEye.
of funny. Yeah. And the other one was that when I was in the city at ground level, particularly with, it seemed to be happening with police officers more than anything else. When I sort of went to photo mode kind of pauses the game. And I don't know if this is a weird glitch or not, but it didn't 100% pause the game. Like time was still creeping forward at a very, very slow rate. And one time I put it into photo mode and then I went and got a coffee and I came back to the console and I noticed that the police officer that I had in the shot that I was taking, his body had warped to the point where his chest had basically U-bended out of his body over to the other side of the screen. It
Sounds
was
amazing.
weird. So
The one visual bug that I've noticed is such a nitpick, and you really have to pay attention for it. But you know how if you're climbing a building, you can look in the windows, you can see, oh, there's actually a room in there, and it's got furniture and everything. But if you claw up the side of a building and you look in a window, there's a doorway that when you climb around the edge of the building, it's like, well, I'm looking at another window here, but through that other window, there was a door there.
Yeah.
They've got some weird four-dimensional interiors going on, but that's a super tiny nitpick. You would never notice that unless you were looking.
No, that's it. You're not going to get out your floor plans and compare notes. Yeah, I get it. All right. Well, we've talked about the visuals. We talked about the sound design. I think photo mode is a topic that we can just touch on briefly because this is probably almost you could do a whole show in itself on photo mode. But what a fucking smart choice they did with their photo mode and having all of the different comic panel options and stickers available. Holy shit! That has just been one of the most incredible things to look at on social media this week. So.
The photo mode for Spider-Man works really well. One, because of the different suits that you can wear. But two, because of the fact that the combat is so interesting to look at. Like, one of my favorite shots I have of the game, I've not actually posted up on Twitter or anything because it's got a suit that could be spoilery for people. But it's easily my favorite shot because I was in midair, ziplining up to some guys that were holding rocket launchers. And so there's a spider web on one guy's face where I was about to fly up and kick him in the face. But midair, I had dodged the other guy's rocket that was launched at me. And I paused at that moment for this really cool pose of Spider-Man. You realize that his eyes are animated, so they're actually really wide. And he's got his spider sense aura around his head is going off. And he's kind of mid-twist, mid-air with this rocket that's heading directly for him. And it's like, that is so cool to look at. Like, I just ended up spending like 5 minutes just kind of swiveling around that scene, just looking at it because it's so neat to look at. And then it ended up being a really, really cool picture as well. But like that sort of thing in a game like this, I think works really, really well. I'm less sure about how well that's going to work in a game like Tomb Raider, where there's a little less motion going on when like Spider-Man is great because you can be swinging down a city street and then pause and take a really cool, photo, right? Whereas Tomb Raider, I'm less sure that works quite as well there, but it will still be incredibly pretty. I have no doubt. It just open world games like this, like, who wants to bet Red Dead has a photo mode?
Oh, if they don't, man. What game is not going to have photo mode from this point onwards? It just seems like the smartest thing to do when you've got any sort of quality visual assets that you want to, have out there. Just
Name
seems
one
like
Xbox exclusive with a photo mode though.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, I mean,
It's
they
all been
might have to do
Sony
it.
so far.
Yeah, well, Sony's got all the pretty games.
Exactly. Yeah.
Simple as that.
But yeah, like, and even like I mentioned, I take my roleplay very seriously. For the first half of Spider-Man, all of the photos I ended up taking were ridiculous selfies where he was just kind of making a face, and he had a whole bunch of guys strung up in a ridiculous pose behind him against a wall or whatever, and just Spider-Man just being like, ha, look at these idiots, I just had fun doing that sort of thing. It was that's why I really enjoyed photo mode 4. But then later on in the game, I could just immerse myself in the visuals through photo mode as well, and just be like, wow, this game is ridiculously pretty when I stop and take in the scenery,
I've been really impressed for the most part, and I mean, this is totally biased by my feed specifically, on how well behaved everybody's been with photo mode and removing spoilers.
Yeah,
I've been really impressed too.
Yeah, they've done a really good job, except for, and I'm going to call them out, Insomniac today fucked up, and they posted a photo that included it was a very, very pretty shot, but it was a shot of the final boss nonetheless. I'm just like, no, why? Why would you do that?
Too soon.
Exactly. Game hasn't even been out for a week, for fuck's sake. Anyway, but yeah.
Who wants to bet that's a marketing department person that just didn't realize, right?
I know. I mean, surely they would know, but yeah. Now, I'm kind of keen to talk about some character stuff, but I think this is where we start to approach spoil territory. So is now a good time to give the warning, do you think?
I think it's a good time.
Yeah.
Dive into that? All right. So for anyone who is listening and is planning on playing Marvel Spider-Man at any point in the near future, let's set ourselves a limit. We're going to say no more than 10 minutes. So we're going to talk about a little bit of character related stuff. We're still not going to go super heavy spoilers, but there is a couple in particular we're going to talk about that you may not want to know about if you plan on experiencing this game for yourself. So if that is the case, skip ahead now, and we'll do the usual sort of wrap up and outro bit. But otherwise, this is the point of no return. You have been warned. All right. Favorite character, guys. What do you think was portrayed very, very well, and maybe what do you think was maybe not portrayed too well, Spider Universe wise? What do you think? Can I start with my down one? My one that I wasn't really happy with?
Yeah, go on.
I was not a fan of Silver Sable at all.
No, nor am I. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I thought that she was very, very one note and didn't really do much at all at the end of the game. Like, kind of, she served the purpose to introduce, her Sable Incorporated or whatever the sort of Sable International sort of, mercenary soldiers kind of group was into the game.
Yeah.
But as far as what role she played and, what they were able to establish with her as a character, I thought it was just, they could have quite easily done without her, essentially.
Yeah, she reminded me a lot of I can't remember her name from Uncharted 4, the mercenary leader in that one.
Oh.
Very similar role as far as like the
you don't
leader
mean
of the
Nadine, who they actually ended up sort of putting into Lost Legacy.
I mean Nadine, yeah, but in Uncharted 4, not in Lost Legacy. In Uncharted 4, I felt like her character was kind of a bit wasted potential, like because she was like written out of the game towards the end and didn't really have much of like a culmination in her story. Yeah. And I feel like it's similar with Silver Sable, where I was like expecting more from her toward the end.
Yeah. No, it was interesting. I wonder if she'll feature in any of the DLC, but we'll see.
I think she will, yeah.
I can think of who my favorite character has been thus far. I'm not going to say Otto because Otto is a clear answer. But
Otto's the obvious one, yeah.
Yeah, he's the obvious one. I actually really like Tombstone. Like, the side missions around Tombstone are one of those things where they actually explain some of the major plotline stuff. Like, it was actually one of the... you know what? I'm going to rant after we do this section about the other stealth sections with like Mary Jane or Miles. But like having done that mission with Mary Jane and actually seen the vehicle and everything like that and being like, oh, what are they using that for? And then later on, it turns up in the major story. That's really cool. Like, I think that is really, really awesome. And then you can continue on with that investigation. And the boss fight with Tombstone was one of the most fun I've actually had in the game.
That was what I was talking about with side missions being really relevant and adding to the whole story.
Yeah, for sure. Like Tombstone was a lot of fun, and he was one of those characters where it's like, okay, he's a drug pushing big invincible dude. I've not read the comics, so I'm not familiar with him. But then during the fight and everything, you kind of learn more about him through fighting him, and by the end of it, I was like, he's a really cool character. I hope I see more of him because he's actually really neat. You know.
Can I just say, in relation to every single boss character or every single member of, Spidey's kind of, rogues gallery that were in this game.
Sinister Six and plus. Yeah.
Every fucking one of them, the backstory and their motivations were covered in a way that was satisfactory to me. Yeah, every single one of them. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a complaint that I want to make, but it's like a complaint with a silver lining, which is the Sinister Six in this game. They're all awesome. Like the designs and the backstory and everything is fantastic. But I really don't like that the E3 trailer showed them breaking out of the raft, and and because that was so late in the game. That's my problem. Is that breakout is like the end of the second act, and there's not a lot of time that you get with those villains in real time. Like you learn a lot about them, but you don't spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah,
and. I wouldn't have minded it so much if that had been a surprise, if that breakout had been a surprise. But because that was shown to me already, I was expecting those Sinister Six to feature more in the game. Because I'm like, they're showing it to me in the trailer already. So that's a small complaint.
I was discussing this with a friend because the whole time he was playing, he was like, I'm like a couple of hours in now and I still haven't seen that breakout. When is it going to happen? And he was quite surprised when, it was like, wow, that's really late. Like, why did they show a gameplay trailer of that? And I was discussing it with him, and it's like, I honestly think that in terms of gameplay, that was less interesting to me than the Fisk fight right at the start. Like, the big battle with Fisk when you're attacking his building and everything, that's way more interesting than that breakout.
Was that? Oh my God,
it's so
I love
satisfying.
Yeah.
It's so satisfying. Like,
shout out to Travis Willingham for voicing Fisk as well. He did such a great job on the voicing for Fisk. Yeah. Oh man.
Like, I want to go back. They've announced New Game Plus, and I want to go back and redo that Fisk fight and suck less.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I agree with you for the most part with the Sinister Six characters, Christian. One thing I will say though is that there was game content about their role in Spider-Man's kind of history before the breakout that you can kind of see as you're going through the main story, like various different bits of newspaper articles and stuff posted up so you can kind of read a little bit about them beforehand and sort of why they're still relevant. And he does sort of make some comments in the dialogue about a couple of the run-ins he's had with them. But like when they break out and their motivations after breaking out in terms of, who they're helping and why they're helping them, man, I was satisfied with how they really built that up. And, when you sort of... there's a particular place that you go to which sort of uncovers a bit more of that stuff, and you're just like, holy shit, this all makes sense. So very, very cool. Mr. Negative, I think we should talk about for a second as well, because he's obviously one of the new kids on the block and ended up being a major feature of the game. We knew that sort of going in with all of the preview footage. Talking about the trailers though, like one really interesting thing that I picked up on is they kind of did the same thing with the gameplay trailer from very early on. With the construction site sort of brawl and the helicopter sort of chase down afterwards, where in the original footage that was shown to everybody, I don't know if you guys remember, but Mr. Negative was actually on that chopper, and that changed in the game. They completely changed that. So, that was a big surprise. It was kind of like how they took Hulk out of the Avengers Infinity War, sort of after showing him in the trailer, sort of running in Wakanda with the rest of the heroes sort of for that big fight. And then he wasn't in that scene at all when it came to the movie. I was just like, man, they really did a sort of, a flip back on that, didn't they? That was very cool. So,
I think that for me, Mr. Negative is actually one of the weaker characters in the game.
Yes.
I think that, his whole thing ends up being like just revenge story. Like he just wants to get back at Norman for revenge because of experiment. I just didn't find it that interesting. And Martin Lee as a character was much more interesting. But Mr. Negative I thought was pretty like boilerplate.
So when I took that mask to Martin Lee and I saw his response, I'm like, please, for God's sake, don't make Martin Lee a villain. Like, I don't want to see that.
I knew it then, but
I was seeing it happening, and then the moment he's like, I need to go on business, it's like, oh God, he's one
reasons.
of them. But then, like, like at the point where I am currently in the game, I still don't feel like it's been justified to me why he's trying to destroy New York. Like,
it comes. It definitely comes.
I disagree, Luke. Actually, I don't think it's justified. There's a reason for it, but I don't think it's good enough.
Yeah.
Whether it's justified or not, it's another matter, because that's going to be a bit subjective. But in terms of the game's method for explaining it, that is probably still yet to come for Matt. So, yeah.
But like at the same time, it's like he's this guy that's running a homeless shelter out of the goodness of his heart. He's doing all these good things. What is so extreme that makes somebody go from that to I'm going to blow up New York City? And I don't think that justification is going to come, you know?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you're probably not too far off with that. Yeah. The character that I was a bit lukewarm on, that I kind of came around on sort of as the game progressed, was actually Mary Jane. So the opening sort of bits with MJ, I was just like, I kind of didn't like the faux Lois Lane angle that they kind of went with for her, where she was
I agree.
A reporter that was also, trying to sort of get in on the action and do her part as well, and not really giving a shit about, how dangerous everything was, much to the disdain of Spider-Man trying to keep us safe kind of thing. I was like, oh God, this isn't going to be that story all over again, is it? But the way that she develops and actually becomes a pretty relevant part of what's going on with Peter and sort of, really helps him out on a few occasions, I think I actually quite appreciated the way that went in the end. And, again, fantastic voice work for her. I think it was Laura Bailey was Mary Jane, so great work on that too. But it was I did feel much better about it by the end. So that was
I
good.
agree. I did feel better about it at the end, but I also agree. Like the whole feisty reporter character, I felt was a bit.
It's better than Damsel in Distress. Let's face it.
It's better than Damsel in Distress, but I feel like it's almost played out. It's not obviously not comparable to Damsel in Distress, but that kind of. Like, why can't the love interest be a hero too, sort of thing?
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that a bunch of times now already as well.
Yeah, I will save my comments on Mary Jane for the next 20 seconds.
Yeah.
We're out of the spoiler mode because, quite frankly, like, I don't dislike Mary Jane. I think that she's been fine, but I don't like playing as her at all. It's not fun.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
It's awful. Those like... Mary Jane and one other character stealth sections are awful. Just the worst.
Yeah, okay, I guess we can say now we're out of stealth mode.
We're out of stealth mode. But yeah, rip him out of the game and replace him with a cutscene, and I don't care.
And
actually, one thing we didn't mention at all is in terms of sort of different areas with different mechanics, and the stealth sections kind of fit into this too. What do you guys think of the sort of science puzzles component of the game? So the various different electronic and sort of
there's
chemistry
like the
tasks
circuits and the spectrographs.
Yeah.
Okay, so circuits, boring. Like, we've seen that pipe puzzle in pretty much every single
BioShock
AAA game. Yeah, it's like AAA game trope. The spectrograph, I actually had a lot of fun with that because it was a unique puzzle. I actually thought it was pretty interesting. It got pretty boring by the end of the game, but I also always found it challenging. The pipe puzzle with the chips and like running electrical charge through. No, I found that really dull. Like, it was actually not that challenging. The only challenge really turned up when it was like, you have to balance the electrical output with what it's requesting. And even then, it's like, okay, I have these charges, I have these minuses. I'm just going to subtract that out and swap them out when I make the path done. But the spectrograph stuff was actually pretty fun. I always found myself a little bit challenged with that one.
I thought they were both inoffensive. Like, I didn't mind either of them, and I'm really glad that neither of them were forced upon you an excessive amount of times in the main storyline. Like, there was just enough like times where you're forced to do those puzzles, and then there's the optional ones that you can sort of do later. So I thought they were both fine.
I definitely think they overstayed their welcome by the end of the game, though. Like, I would have liked a bit more variety and not just have two types only. I think it was kind of
throw one more into the mix.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if they kept the spectrograph but replaced the stupid pipe puzzle with something else, I would have been much happier. Yeah. Like,
the best part about doing them was the narrative while you were doing them, like actually what they related to, like particularly once you were doing in the lab. So, yeah.
And you were never in them for too long either. Like, you were there briefly during a mission and then you were out. And that was it. You were straight back to being Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, all right. Well, I think that's probably covered just about everything we wanted to cover tonight. Sort of sans any other massive spoilers that we want to stay away from completely. So, our individual thoughts on the game. I think the general theme here is everybody should go out and fucking play this thing because it's goddamn. Yeah.
I think so. I had made some comments on Twitter that were talking about how it suffers a bit from Uncharted-itis. And that was specifically talking about a boss fight that's in the mid-game that when I started getting to the end-game boss fights, I completely changed my tune. I don't retract the statement, though, that it still suffers a little bit from Uncharted-itis with, hey, let's go and make this really cinematic scene, but we're going to take out all of the really cool abilities that you get to use and tell you to just dodge these QuickTime events in a really contracted space and then mash the melee button. Like, it was just not fun. Like, that happens, and when it does, it's like, ugh, just get me out of here as quickly as possible. And what's worse, if you turn off QuickTime events, you still have to do that. Like, nothing about that fight changes. Yeah. It still forces you to do them because they're not QuickTime events. They're combat events. All the QuickTime event stuff is when it pops up with a button. So this wasn't my complaint. I actually did all the QuickTime event stuff because I actually don't mind it necessarily. But in that fight, it was not fun. I got really frustrated with that fight in particular. And
there's a lot of fear early on. There's a lot of fear early on with the footage we saw about there being way too much QuickTime content in the game, and I'm very happy that wasn't the case.
Yeah, it was fine.
When it has happened, I've been like, it's added to the intensity, so I don't mind that. I understand some people not... Most of the time, I dislike QuickTime events. The fact that I didn't actually find them that bad here was pretty good. But yeah, like, just that one mid-game boss fight soiled a lot of my feelings about the game for a little bit, until I started getting to the end game boss fights, which are so fun so far. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My individual thought on the game is that it is the best in its class, but its class is a little overplayed, and I think the game is very safe. So the open world game with a bunch of collectibles and like side missions scattered about, I think I've just about run out of like my number of times I'll enjoy that genre of game. It's getting a little thin.
Yeah.
But Spider-Man is lucky because it's the best of that type of game. So
because
That's
what
fair.
it does best is being Spider-Man, right?
Yes.
Like it nails Spider-Man so good that I think if you went and did the same game and you were playing as if this was another Batman game, I would not rate it nearly so highly because it would just be it was just doing the exact same thing we were doing before. But they nail the swinging, they nail the combat. It's so satisfying to be Spider-Man that I can ignore the fact that everything else that's in there I've seen before and they're playing safe because the Spider-Man stuff in particular isn't.
I don't think the game is innovative, but I think I think it's a masterclass.
Yeah.
I think that Marvel's Spider-Man is definitely the best Arkham game. Basically. No,
That's a good
I mean,
review.
seriously, any game where like there's a fast travel feature that you really don't want to use because swinging through the city is more fun, they're doing something right. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it is good. All right, well, that is a good chat about a very, very good game. So if you haven't played it yet, beware of spoilers on the internet because, of course, there are a lot of them. And, a lot of that photo mode goodness, for the most part, is pretty safe, but you'll always find one or two that might give the game away a little bit. So tread carefully. I think it's almost the same approach that you take when you see any sort of the Marvel movies in the cinema. Like, there's a certain amount of time where you just have to be very careful looking at anything on the internet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is a wrap for tonight. So over the next week, I don't know what you gents are going to be playing, but Shadow of the Tomb Raider drops for me tomorrow. So I'm going to be grabbing that and jumping straight in and see what the photo mode's like in that game. So you might see some more images posted from me shortly. What's everyone else got on? Matt, you're obviously going to finish up Spider-Man, so...
Yes, hopefully tonight. I will probably sit down and try to finish it tonight, and then I'll be sharing my thoughts with everybody.
Nice.
But other than that, I have been playing a little bit more WoW, and I will probably be refounding my old guild and leveling up my monk. We just got to Pandaria, which is awesome. So, yeah, I'm still playing that. Other than that, I need to finish Destiny 2 Forsaken.
Yeah, would recommend. Christian, you're all set up in your new place now, so what's on the list for you? Yeah.
I'm going to be looking at the hidden trophy list for Spider-Man and deciding whether it's worth going for the Platinum Trophy or not.
The answer is
and
yes.
So that'll yeah, okay. So I might be platinuming Spider-Man, but I'll also be going back to Hollow Knight and finishing Hollow Knight.
Hells yes. Yeah, I got to get that at some point as well. Oh my God. Still going to be nuts for the next few weeks, but I'm looking forward to it. It's a good time to be playing video games, that's for sure. All right, well, let's go and get to some of those video games. Thank you very much for listening tonight. We'll be back again with another helping of fantastic game talk next week. Until then, have a great one, and we'll see you soon. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Party Loaded podcast is a Channel Endgame production. For this and more great gaming content, bookmark channelendgame.com.